My daughter refused me a glass of water in the hospital, but the next day, the insurance company deposited $1.6 million into my account. Some humiliations mark you forever. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for just a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Evelyn Morales. I am 64 years old, and I lived in a small 2-story house in the Heights in Houston, Texas. A little house I bought with my own 2 hands after 30 years of sewing prom dresses in a workshop that smelled of hot irons and other people's dreams. That morning, the 4th of July, as I was preparing my coffee the way I have every day for 40 years, strong and black, with a cinnamon stick, using that old wooden spoon I inherited from my mother, I didn't know that my life was about to split in two like a wishbone pulled apart. The accident was so silly, I'm almost embarrassed to tell it. I was walking down the steps at the East End Farmers Market, carrying my groceries for the week. Tomatoes as red as a sunset, bell peppers for a good pot roast, onions that made me cry less than my own life did. My legs, already tired from 64 years of carrying the world on my shoulders, got tangled in a plastic bag someone had carelessly thrown away. The pain was immediate, as if someone had driven a knife into my hip and was slowly twisting it. I cried out without meaning to, and the last thing I remember is the metallic taste of fear in my mouth and the voices of strangers asking if anyone knew my family. I woke up at Memorial Hermann Hospital in that room, number 417, that now haunts my nightmares. The walls were hospital green, that shade of green that isn't about hope, but about contained pain. And the air smelled of disinfectant mixed with the suffering of others. My left leg was in a cast up to my knee, and I had tubes connected to places in my body I preferred not to think about. The nurse, a young woman with tired eyes and a crooked cap, explained I'd been unconscious for almost 6 hours. A fractured hip, severe dehydration, and a fever that wouldn't drop below 102. Who can we call, ma'am? Do you have any family? Family. A word that once filled my chest with pride, and now only left a cold hollow in my stomach. Yes, honey. My daughter, Jessica. She's in my emergency contacts. What I didn't know was that this would be the exact moment I'd discover just how small I had become in the eyes of the person for whom I had sacrificed my entire existence. Jessica arrived 2 hours later, her Louboutin heels echoing in the hallway like hammer blows on my heart. She was wearing her black power suit, the same one she wore for important hearings at the law firm where she worked, and carrying a leather handbag that cost more than 3 months of my mortgage. Her ash blonde hair was perfect, as always, not a single strand out of place. But her eyes, dear God, her eyes looked at me as if I were a problem that needed to be solved, quickly. How are you? She asked. But her tone was the same one she'd used to ask a stranger for the time. It hurts so much, honey. And I'm so thirsty. Could you please get me a glass of water? What happened next is etched into my soul like a scar that will never heal. Jessica let out a deep sigh, as if I'd asked her to move a mountain with her bare hands. She crossed her arms and looked at me with a disdain so pure it took my breath away. Mom? Seriously? There are nurses for that. I didn't come here to be your maid. I'm already doing a lot just by showing up. I have a major meeting in 2 hours with millionaire clients, and you pull me out of my work for this. I was speechless, literally without words. In my 64 years of life, I had never felt a humiliation so deep, so cutting, so absolute. Besides, she continued, checking her phone as if my presence were an irrelevance, I don't understand why you always have to be so dramatic. You fell, you broke something, they're fixing it. What more do you want? For me to cry and take care of you like you're a baby? I closed my eyes and tried to remember the 3-year-old girl who cried in my arms when her father left us. The same one I held every night when she had nightmares. The one who used to tell me, "Mommy, I love you to the moon and back," while I braided her hair for school. How had we come to this? The fever was consuming me. My throat felt like sandpaper. And my own daughter, the person for whom I had worked 3 jobs for years, for whom I had sold my few pieces of jewelry to pay for college, whom I had raised with all the love my heart could hold, was denying me a simple glass of water. "Honey," I whispered, "I'm just so thirsty. Please." She didn't look up from her phone. "Ask the nurses. That's what they're paid for." And she left. Just like that. Without a goodbye. Without asking when I'd be discharged. Without saying when she'd be back. Just the sound of her heels fading down the hall. Each click another stab in my already wounded heart. I lay there, in that hospital bed that smelled of loneliness and abandonment, staring at the ceiling as silent tears streamed down my cheeks. I didn't cry because of the physical pain. That was nothing compared to what I felt inside. I cried because I had just understood that to my daughter, I had become a burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. I cried because I remembered all the nights I stayed up sewing doll clothes for her, all the dollars I saved by denying myself just to give her the best. I cried for every, "I love you, honey," I'd said without getting a response. For every unanswered call, for every ignored text message. But most of all, I cried because in that moment, I understood that I had raised a stranger who carried my last name, but not my heart. What I didn't know was that the universe, with its strange sense of justice, was already preparing a surprise that would change everything. A surprise that would arrive exactly 24 hours later, with a number that would shake not only my bank account, but my entire existence. That night in the hospital was the longest of my life. Not because of the pain from the broken hip, which shot through me like knives every time I tried to move. It was long because my mind wouldn't stop replaying every moment of contempt I had lived with Jessica in recent years. When did it all begin? At what point did my little girl become this cold woman who looked at me like I was an old piece of furniture cluttering up her living room? I remembered when she was 7 and got chicken pox. It was 2 weeks of no sleep, putting cool compresses on her forehead, giving her chamomile tea every 2 hours, singing her the lullabies my own mother had taught me. Rockabye Baby, in its sweetest version. Hush, little baby, until she finally settled. Her father, Julian, had disappeared when things got tough, as he always did when responsibility came knocking. But I stayed. I always stayed. When Jessica turned 16, I worked double shifts at the sewing workshop for 6 months to pay for the sweet 16 party she dreamed of. I sold my only gold ring, the one my mother had left me, to buy her the pink dress she'd seen in a magazine. It was made of bright pink taffeta, with sequin embroidery that shimmered like stars. I watched her have the first dance with her date, radiant, beautiful, happy. That night, after everyone had gone, she hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Thanks, Mom. You're the best mom in the world." Where did that girl go? At 18, when she got into the University of Houston Law Center, I was working from Monday to Sunday. A seamstress by day, a cleaner at night in downtown office buildings. I'd get home at 2 in the morning with my fingers swollen from sewing and my knees destroyed from mopping floors. But it was worth it. My daughter was going to be a lawyer. She was going to have the life I could never give myself. Jessica would study in her room while I made coffee to stay awake, cutting fabric until 4 in the morning. She never complained about my hours, never asked if I needed help. She simply took for granted that I would be there, holding up her world while she built her own. When she graduated 8 years ago, I was in the front row on campus, wearing my best dress, a navy blue one I'd made myself for special occasions. With tears of pride streaming down my cheeks, my daughter, a Juris Doctor, the first in our family to graduate from college. But when she came out in her cap and gown, surrounded by classmates dressed in designer clothes, she barely acknowledged me. A quick kiss on the cheek, a forced smile for the photos, and then she was off with her friends to celebrate at an expensive restaurant in River Oaks. I wasn't invited. "You just wouldn't get what we're talking about, Mom. It's school stuff, our career plans. It's not personal. It's not personal." As if dedicating 20 years of my life to her dreams was something casual, unimportant. Things got worse when she met Richard 5 years ago. A 35-year-old man, a lawyer like her, with a brand new Audi and suits that cost more than my salary for 3 months. He came from a wealthy family from Tanglewood, the kind of family that never had to choose between paying the electricity bill and buying food. The first time she brought him home, I had made my slow-cooked brisket, the one that takes all day, with a dry rub of secret spices, smoked with patient, infinite love. It was my special dish, the one I made for important celebrations. Richard took a single bite, wrinkled his nose, and pushed the plate away. "It's a bit heavy for my palate," he said in that nasal tone he used for everything. "Don't you have something a bit simpler?" Jessica turned red with embarrassment. Not because of him, but because of me. "Mom, next time let's just make pasta. It's more universal. Universal. My brisket, a recipe passed down from my grandmother to my mother, from my mother to me, wasn't good enough for the refined palate of my daughter's boyfriend. That night, after they left, I threw the entire brisket in the trash. Pounds of work, ingredients that had cost me half my weekly pay, wasted because it wasn't universal enough. When they got married 3 years ago, I wasn't even invited. I found out on Facebook, seeing photos of an elegant wedding at a 5-star resort in the Texas Hill Country. Jessica in a white gown, radiant, surrounded by well-dressed people smiling for professional cameras. I wasn't in a single picture. When I called to ask why she hadn't invited me, her answer broke my heart into pieces so small I still find them when I least expect it. "Mom, it was a very exclusive wedding. Small, intimate, just people from the same social level. I didn't want you to feel out of place. Out of place. At my own daughter's wedding. But the worst came later. The grandchildren I never met. Santiago and Sophia, 2-year-old twins who exist for me only in the pictures Jessica posts on Instagram. Pictures of them in beautiful gardens, at fancy restaurants, on trips to pristine beaches. Never in my arms. They're just too little to go out so much, Mom. And you live so far away. And Richard prefers they not have too much exposure. I live a 40-minute bus ride from her house in the Galleria area. 40 minutes that might as well be 40 years, given how impossible the journey to my own family had become. The last 2 years were a slow, constant torture. Calls she didn't answer, texts she read but didn't reply to, invitations for lunch that she'd decline with excuses about her busy schedule. I kept sending her money when I could. $20 here, $50 there, for her little cravings, for her whims, but I never even got a thank you. On my 63rd birthday, 9 months ago, I waited for her call until 11 at night. Nothing. The next day, I called her. "Oh, Mom, it completely slipped my mind. I just have so much going on. Richard has a huge case and the kids are being impossible. How about we get together next week?" Next week never came. And now, lying in this hospital bed with a broken hip and a shattered heart, I finally understood the truth I had been denying for years. To Jessica, I was no longer her mother. I was a relic from a past that embarrassed her, an uncomfortable reminder of where she came from, an obstacle between her and the sophisticated life she had built with Richard. The night shift nurse, Maria, came in at 11 to check my vitals. She was an older woman, around my age, with gentle hands and a motherly voice. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Morales?" "Sad, honey. Very sad. Because of the accident?" "No, because of my daughter." Maria nodded with the kind of wisdom that only comes from years and shared suffering. "Children sometimes forget we're human too, ma'am. They see us being strong for so many years that they don't understand we can also break." "Do you have children?" 3. "And none of them have spoken to me since I ran out of money to lend them." We sat in silence, 2 broken mothers acknowledging their mutual pain in the dim light of a public hospital ward. "But you know what, Mrs. Morales?" she said before leaving. "Sometimes life has a funny way of serving up justice. You keep the faith." I didn't know then how prophetically true her words were, because the next day, everything would change forever. The second day in the hospital dawned just as gray as my mood. The fever had subsided a bit, but the pain in my hip had become a constant, throbbing reminder of my new reality. A 64-year-old woman, alone, and broken in more ways than I could count. Jessica hadn't returned. She hadn't even called to ask how I was doing. Nothing. As if I had ceased to exist after she refused me that glass of water that never came. Around 10 in the morning, while I was picking at the hospital breakfast, watery eggs and coffee that tasted like dirty water, a man in a dark suit appeared with a folder under his arm. He introduced himself as Mr. Mendez, from the hospital's administration department. Good morning, Mrs. Morales. I'm here to review some matters related to your medical insurance. Medical insurance. I barely remembered what insurance I had. Over 30 years ago, when I worked at the Good Paper Printing Press in the North Side, they made all the employees sign up for a private policy. It was a company thing, an automatic deduction from my paycheck that I never questioned. When I left that job to focus on sewing full-time, I just kept paying the monthly premium out of habit, like paying the light bill or the water bill, without giving it much thought. Do you know what kind of policy you have, ma'am? Mr. Mendez asked, pulling some papers from his folder. Honestly, no. I just know I've been paying about $40 a month for many, many years. I've never used it for anything serious. The man reviewed his documents carefully, adjusting his glasses as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. Mrs. Morales, your policy is very old, from 1991, and it contains clauses that are no longer offered in modern insurance plans. What kind of clauses? Full hospitalization coverage with an indemnity for accident and temporary disability, and a 12% annual compound interest rider on the base amount for all years without a claim. The technical jargon sounded like a foreign language. I didn't understand a word he was saying. What does that mean, Mr. Mendez? It means, ma'am, that you have been paying for 32 years for a policy that has been accumulating value every year you haven't used it. And since you've never had a serious accident until now, he paused, as if he were calculating numbers in his head. What is it? Your insurance provider is required to pay you $1,600,000. The world stopped. Literally. I felt as if someone had pressed the pause button on the universe. The words floated in the air, unable to find a place to land in my brain. Excuse me? $1,600,000, ma'am. That is the amount owed based on your accident policy, plus the compounded interest accumulated over 3 decades, plus the indemnity for temporary disability. I just stared at him as if he had spoken in another language. $1.6 million. An amount of money I had never seen in my life. An amount that was more than I had earned in all my years as a seamstress, a cleaner, a caregiver, and every other job I'd ever had to raise Jessica. Are you sure? Isn't there some mistake? We've already verified it 3 times with the insurer. The deposit will be made to the bank account you have on file within the next 24 hours. Mr. Mendez left, leaving me alone with news I didn't know how to process. $1.6 million. Enough money to never worry about the mortgage again, to buy a little house of my own, to travel to the places I'd only ever seen on TV shows, to eat at restaurants without looking at the prices on the menu. But the first person I thought of wasn't me. It was Jessica. When she finds out about the money, she'll come running, I thought. And that idea filled me with more sadness than joy, because I knew, with the painful certainty that only 64 years of life can give you, that my daughter would reappear. Not because she had realized how badly she'd treated me. Not because she'd reflected on the glass of water she'd denied me. Not because she missed her mother, but because now I had something she needed. That afternoon, as I looked out the hospital window at the cars and buses passing on Westheimer Road, I remembered something my mother had told me years before she died. Honey, money doesn't change people. It only reveals who they truly are. At the time, I didn't understand the weight of those words. Now, lying in a hospital bed with a fortune I never knew I had, I was beginning to understand. The nurse Maria came in at 8 that evening to change my dressing. You could tell she'd had a long day. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. How are you feeling today, Mrs. Morales? Confused, honey. Very confused. I told her about the visit from Mr. Mendez, about the insurance money. Maria sat down in the chair next to my bed with a serious expression. Ma'am, can I give you a piece of advice? Of course. Don't tell anyone about that money just yet. Especially not your daughter. Let a few days go by. Watch how they treat you when they think you have nothing. That will tell you everything you need to know. Why do you say that? Because I've seen too many cases like yours. Families who ignore their elderly parents until they find out there's an inheritance involved. It's sad, but it's the truth. Maria was right, and I knew it. But a part of me, that foolish part that still hoped my daughter loved me unconditionally, wanted to believe that maybe Jessica would come back on her own, full of regret, asking for forgiveness. That night, I dreamed of my granddaughter Sophia, whom I had only ever seen in pictures. In the dream, she ran towards me with her arms wide open, shouting, "Grandma!" with that pure joy only children have. She hugged me tight and told me she had missed me so much. I woke up crying, knowing that dream would never come true. The next day, Friday, Mr. Mendez returned with more papers. "Mrs. Morales, the deposit has been made. You can verify it by calling your bank whenever you're ready." I called my bank's customer service line with trembling hands. After being transferred between 3 different operators and providing all my details, a woman's voice confirmed what seemed unreal. "Your current savings account balance is $1,603,200.57. I hung up the phone and sat in absolute silence for several minutes. It was real. All of it. For the first time in my adult life, I had financial security. For the first time since Jessica was born, I wouldn't have to worry about making it to the end of the month, about the utility bills, about choosing between buying medicine or food. But also, for the first time in my life, I understood the meaning of true loneliness, because I had over $1.5 million and no one to share the joy with, no one who would be genuinely happy for me, no one to say, "That's wonderful, Mom. You deserve it after working so hard." I only had the bitter certainty that when the news got out, the vultures dressed as family would arrive, feigning a love they never felt. That night, before falling asleep, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell Jessica anything about the money, at least not yet. I wanted to see if, after the incident with the glass of water, after abandoning me in the hospital like I was trash, she would have the decency to come back on her own and apologize. I wanted to know if there was anything left of the little girl who once told me I was the best mom in the world. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I didn't have to wait long to confirm that Maria was right. On Monday morning, just a day after the deposit was confirmed, my phone started ringing off the hook. First, it was WhatsApp messages. Then, insistent calls. All from the same number. Jessica. "Mom, good morning. How did you wake up? Better, I hope." "Mom, it's Jess. I was so worried about you all night." "Mommy, dearest, did you have breakfast? Do you need anything?" "Mommy, dearest." She hadn't called me that in at least 3 years. The last time was when she needed to borrow $2,000 to fix her car, and I, as always, said yes, even though it meant pawning my sewing machine. Money she never paid back, by the way. I didn't answer any of her messages. I wanted to see how far she would go. I wanted to know if the contempt from the glass of water incident had been real, or if she could now pretend it never happened, knowing about the money. At 11 in the morning, she burst into the hospital like a hurricane, but this time she was different. She brought flowers, a huge bouquet of red roses she had probably bought at the most expensive florist in the Galleria. She was wearing stylish but casual clothes, designer jeans and a white blouse that highlighted her tan from a weekend trip to South Padre Island. Her perfect hair, her flawless makeup, her brilliant smile, the most perfect fake smile I had ever seen. "Mom! My darling!" she exclaimed from the doorway, like an actress making her entrance in a soap opera. "I came as soon as I could. Forgive me for not coming sooner, but I had to arrange everything at work so I can be with you for as long as you need." She approached my bed and gave me a kiss on the forehead, a kiss that felt cold, calculated, and completely devoid of any real affection. "How are you feeling, my beautiful mommy?" My beautiful mommy. There were those cloying pet names again, the ones she hadn't used since she was a little girl. "The same as I felt on Friday, honey. When I asked you for a glass of water and you told me you weren't my maid." I saw her expression falter for a fraction of a second. A micro-expression of discomfort that she immediately tried to disguise. "Oh, Mom, forgive me. I was just so stressed that day. Richard was having problems at the firm and I was on edge. It wasn't personal, you know. You know I love you with all my soul. I love you with all my soul." The words sounded as phony as Monopoly money. "Oh, really? And is that why you didn't visit all weekend? Because of Richard's stress? It's just, I didn't want to bother you while you were resting. I thought it was better to let you recover in peace." Lie after lie after lie. Every word that came out of her mouth was a lie so transparent it was embarrassing. She sat in the chair next to my bed and put on an exaggerated look of concern. "Mom, we need to talk about something very important. I found out about the insurance." There it was, the real reason for her visit. Not my health, not my emotional well-being, not the fact that her mother had been alone in a hospital for 3 days without a single call. The money. What insurance, honey? The policy, Mom. The one that's going to give you a huge compensation for the accident. Oh, that. Yes, they mentioned something. But I wasn't really paying attention. It was a lie, of course. But I wanted to see how far her performance would go. "Mom, this is very serious. It's millions of dollars. A huge amount of money that could completely change your life." "You think so, honey?" "Of course. That's why I'm here. To help you manage all of this. Because you don't have experience with such large sums, and there are many things you have to consider. Taxes, investments, how to protect the money. Protect the money. Not protect me. Protect the money. It's very generous of you to worry about me, Jessica. Especially after the thing with the water. Mom, please, let's not talk about that anymore. It was a misunderstanding. The important thing now is your future. Our future. Our future. Now suddenly, we had a future together. Richard and I have been talking," she continued, settling into the chair as if preparing for a business presentation. "And we think it would be best for you to move in with us. We have a guest house in the backyard that's perfect for you. Independent, but close to family. Family. That word again. And the children? Santiago and Sophia? Because 3 years ago you told me it was better if I didn't meet them, to avoid exposing them." "Oh, Mom, that was different. The kids were so little then. They're older now. They'll love having their grandma nearby." "Are you sure? Because, as I recall, Richard didn't want them near people of what did you call it? My social level?" Jessica blushed. She knew I had caught her in her own lies. That was a misunderstanding too. Richard has always been very fond of you. He was the one who suggested you come live with us. Of course. Richard, who had sneered at my brisket, who had never spoken more than 5 consecutive words to me, who looked at me like I was an annoying insect, was now very fond of me. All because money had entered the equation. And another thing, Mom. Richard knows the best financial advisors in the city, people who manage the accounts of millionaires. He could help you invest all that money so that it grows, and you never have to worry about anything again. There was the real plan. For Richard to manage my money. For me to sign whatever papers they put in front of me. For me to trust the very people who had excluded me from their lives for years. That sounds very tempting, honey, doesn't it? Imagine, Mom. You'd live in a beautiful house, in a safe neighborhood. The kids could visit you every day. You could meet our friends, go to nice places with us. It would be like a new life, where I would be the wealthy grandmother who solved their financial problems and they would be the loving family I had always dreamed of. And what would I have to do? Nothing, Mom. Just let us take care of you. Just trust us and enjoy your money. My money or our money? The question caught her off guard. I watched her calculate her response, searching for the right words to not sound too obvious. Your money, of course. But you know, when a family is united, everything is shared. Like when I was a little girl and you shared everything with me. When she was a little girl and I shared everything. But when I needed a glass of water, she had nothing to share. I find your proposal very interesting, Jessica. Let me think about it. Perfect. While you think it over, how about we start with some basic paperwork? Just to get a head start. For example, we could go to the bank tomorrow so you can add my name to your account. You know, in case you need help managing the transactions. Add her name to my account. To help me with the transactions. In that moment, I understood that my daughter hadn't come to take care of me. She had come to hunt me. Like a predator that senses the vulnerability of its prey and moves with deadly precision to get what it wants. The little girl who had once cried in my arms when her father left us was now planning how to take possession of the only financial security I had ever had in my life. All right, honey, we'll sort out the bank tomorrow. Her smile became enormous, genuinely happy for the first time since she had arrived. Perfect. I'm going to call Richard right now to tell him. He's going to be so happy to know that we can finally take care of you the way you deserve. She stood up, gave me another cold kiss on the forehead, and walked out of the room, dialing a number on her cell phone. I heard her speaking in the hallway. Honey, it's a done deal. She accepted the proposal. We're going to the bank tomorrow. Yes, I told her about adding my name. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She doesn't suspect a thing. I was left alone in my hospital bed, my heart broken into 1,000 more pieces than it already was. Because now I had confirmation of what I had feared for years. To my daughter, I was not a person. I was an opportunity. I couldn't sleep that night. Jessica's words spun around in my head like a broken record. She doesn't suspect a thing, over and over, until they became an echo bouncing off the walls of my skull. How had I gotten to this point? When had my own daughter started to see me as an idiot, easy to manipulate? At 4 a.m, listening to the sounds of the hospital, beeping monitors, nurses walking the halls, the distant cry of someone else suffering in solitude, I made the hardest decision of my life. I wasn't going to the bank with Jessica, but I wasn't going to tell her no either. I wanted to see just how far she was willing to take her charade as a loving daughter. When she arrived the next day, at 10 o'clock sharp as we had agreed, she brought new clothes for me, a navy blue dress, comfortable shoes, even a string of fake pearls she had probably bought at a department store. So, you look beautiful when we go to the bank, Mom. I want people to see how elegant my mother is. My mother. Now I was her mother again. Aren't you embarrassed for the people at the bank to know where you come from, honey? Wouldn't you prefer something more universal? The reference to her comment about my brisket made her uncomfortable, but she recovered quickly. Oh, Mom, why would you say that? I've always been proud of you. Always. Like when she didn't invite me to her wedding. Like when I wasn't allowed to meet my own grandchildren. Like when she denied me a glass of water 3 days ago. All right, honey. But I have a question before we leave. Ask away, Mom. Why do you want to take care of me now? What's changed since Friday? I saw the panic in her eyes. Just for a second. But I saw it. Like a trapped animal looking for an escape. It's just, I realized how badly I had treated you. I felt horrible all night. I told Richard I had been a bad daughter, and he helped me understand that I needed to apologize. Richard again, the man who had become her moral advisor overnight. And what exactly did he tell you? He said that family is the most important thing. That money doesn't matter if you don't have someone to love. Money doesn't matter. Coming from the same person who had come running to the hospital as soon as he heard about the $1.5 million. Your husband is a very wise man. Yes, Mom. That's why I think we'll be so happy living together. Like a real family. A real family. After years of exclusion, humiliation, and contempt, now we were going to be a real family. We left the hospital in her car, a white BMW that smelled of expensive perfume and air conditioning. During the drive to the bank, Jessica chattered endlessly about the plans she had for me. You're going to love the guest house, Mom. It has a full kitchen where you can cook whatever you want, and a little garden where you can plant flowers. A kitchen where I could cook food she wouldn't eat because it wasn't universal enough. And on the weekends, we can go out together. Shopping, to the salon, to nice restaurants. Like mother and daughter. Like mother and daughter. For 3 years, I had been too embarrassing to be seen with in public, but now that I had money, I could be her official companion. We arrived at a Bank of America on Post Oak Boulevard, a large branch with freezing air conditioning and employees in suits who treated you differently depending on your account balance. The bank manager, a woman in her 40s with designer glasses and a professional smile, welcomed us into her private office. Good morning, Mrs. Morales. I'm Patricia Vasquez. I understand you'd like to make some changes to your account. Yes, Jessica answered before I could open my mouth. My mother would like to add my name as a co-owner of the account, so I can help her with the banking. Is that correct, Mrs. Morales? I looked at Jessica. She was beaming, expectant, like a child waiting for a Christmas present. Well, Ms. Vasquez, I'd actually like to ask about something else first. Of course. What is it? What are my options for protecting my money from people who might want to take advantage of me? The silence in the office became so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jessica stared at me, confused, as if she couldn't understand why I would ask such a question. "There are several options, ma'am," Ms. Vasquez explained with professional care. "Trusts, accounts with withdrawal restrictions, investments that require a notarized signature to be modified. And what if a family member tried to pressure me to access my money?" Jessica turned pale. "Mom, why are you asking that? I would never pressure you. I just want to help." "I know, honey. But you never know what might happen in the future." The manager continued explaining the asset protection options while Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Her perfect smile had vanished, replaced by a look of growing anxiety. "You know what, Ms. Vasquez?" I finally said. "Let's just leave everything as it is for now. I need more time to think." "Of course, Mrs. Morales, there's no rush." We left the bank in silence. Jessica drove with her knuckles white, gripping the steering wheel, clearly frustrated. "Mom, I don't understand. Why didn't you add my name to the account?" "Because I want to be sure it's the right thing to do, honey. But I only want to help you. Who do you think you need to be protected from?" "I don't know, Jessica. Who do you think?" The rest of the drive was silent and tense. When we got back to the hospital, Jessica said a quick goodbye, claiming she had an important client meeting. "I'll come by early tomorrow so we can keep talking about this, okay?" "Of course, honey." But she didn't come the next day, or the day after. For 4 days, nothing. No calls, no texts, no flowers, no visits. It was as if I had ceased to exist for her all over again. On the 5th day, she showed up with Richard. My son-in-law strode into my hospital room like he owned the place. Expensive suit, gold watch, the attitude of an important man who has no time to waste. "Evelyn," he said without a greeting, "we need to talk." Not even Mrs. Morales or mother-in-law, just my first name, spoken as if I were his employee. "Jessica told me you had some doubts at the bank the other day." "That's right. Look, this is very simple. You have a large amount of money that you don't know how to manage. We have experience managing investments. It's only logical that we work together. Work together, as if we were lifelong business partners. And what do I get out of this partnership? You get security, you get family, you get to have your grandchildren know you and love you. My grandchildren, who until a week ago couldn't meet me because they were too little to be exposed. And what do you get?" Richard exchanged a glance with Jessica, a glance they didn't even bother to hide. "We get the peace of mind of knowing you're well taken care of." "I see. So, can we go to the bank tomorrow and sort out the account?" "I'll think about it." Richard grew impatient. His mask of false politeness began to crack. "Evelyn, let's be realistic. You're 64. You're not going to live forever. Wouldn't you rather make sure that money stays in the family instead of going to the government in taxes?" There it was. The veiled threat. The insinuation that my death was inevitable and it would be better for everyone if I just handed over control of my money before it was too late. "You're right, Richard. I'm not going to live forever." "Exactly. That's why it's important to act fast. But as long as I am alive, that money is mine, and I decide what to do with it." The silence that followed was icy. Jessica and Richard looked at each other again, and in that look, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't filial love. It wasn't concern for my well-being. It was pure calculation. The cold math of how much money was at stake and what the fastest way to access it was. "Okay, Mom," Jessica finally said, recovering her honeyed tone. "Take all the time you need. We'll be here to support you." They left, but their presence lingered in my room like toxic smoke. That night, I called Ms. Vasquez at the number she had given me. "Ms. Vasquez, I want to open a new account at a different bank, and I want all the information to be completely confidential." "Is there a problem, Mrs. Morales?" "Yes, there is. The problem is that I've just understood that money doesn't change people. It only reveals who they've always been. And my daughter had always been a stranger. The next 3 days were the strangest of my life. Jessica and Richard visited me every afternoon, always with the same old song, the bank account, the move, the happy family we were going to be. But something inside me had shifted, as if someone had turned on a light in a room that had been dark for years. In the mornings, when they weren't there, I made my own plans. On Tuesday, Ms. Vasquez came to the hospital in person. a professional woman who immediately understood the situation without my having to explain much. Mrs. Morales, we opened your new account at Chase, as you requested. All the money was transferred this morning. Your daughter and son-in-law no longer have any way of tracking your financial movements. And if they go to my original bank, they'll just find an empty account. Legally, you have the right to move your money wherever you wish without notifying anyone. I felt free for the first time in years. Like when I was a little girl and would sneak off to the market without telling my mother, knowing I had a secret no one else knew. On Wednesday, I hired a lawyer, Mr. Morales, a serious man in his 50s who specialized in family law. He arrived at the hospital with his briefcase and a small audio recorder. Ma'am, I need you to tell me exactly what has happened, in detail. I told him everything: the denied glass of water, the abandonment in the hospital, Jessica's miraculous appearance when she learned of the money, the lies, the manipulation, the pressure to access my account. Do you have any proof of this behavior? I have witnesses. The nurses who were here the day she refused me the water. Maria saw the whole thing. Perfect. We'll need their testimonies. Anything else? I remembered something I had forgotten in the midst of all the drama. Mr. Morales, Jessica recorded a video call the day she came with the flowers. She wanted to show off on her Instagram that she was visiting her sick mother, but she forgot to stop recording when she stepped into the hallway to talk on the phone with Richard. Do you have access to that recording? Jessica posted it to her Instagram stories. It's probably still there. The lawyer smiled for the first time since he had arrived. Ma'am, that is pure gold, a confession recorded by them themselves. That afternoon, when my loving visitors arrived, I was ready. How did you wake up today, Mommy? Jessica asked with her plastic smile. Very well, honey. In fact, I have some good news. Their eyes lit up like Christmas lights. You've decided about the account? Better than that. I already went to the bank. Richard straightened up in his chair like a dog smelling food. Really? You added Jessica as a co-owner? Not exactly. They both looked at me, confused. I transferred all the money to another account, at another bank, in my name only. The silence that followed was so profound, you could hear my own heartbeat. What? Jessica whispered. You heard me, honey. I moved my money where no one else can touch it. Richard shot to his feet so fast his chair nearly tipped over. Are you crazy? Do you know what you've just done? Yes, Richard. I've protected what's mine. That money should be for the family. Jessica is your only daughter. You're right. She is my only daughter. The same one who denied me a glass of water when I was dehydrated. The same one who didn't visit me for 3 days after abandoning me here. The same one who came running the second she heard there was money involved. Jessica started to cry. But they weren't tears of pain or regret. They were tears of frustration, of rage, of someone watching what they thought was theirs slip through their fingers. Mom, how can you think that of me? I love you. I've always loved you. Oh, really? Did you love me when you didn't invite me to your wedding? That was different. Did you love me when you told me you didn't want people to see where you came from? Mom, please. Did you love me when you brought Richard to my house and he sneered at my food? That has nothing to do with— It has everything to do with it, Jessica, I shouted, and it was the first time in years my voice had come out with its full force. It has to do with respect. It has to do with dignity. It has to do with treating me like a human being and not an ATM. Richard took a threatening step toward my bed. Evelyn, you don't know what you're doing. A woman your age, all alone with so much money. It's dangerous. There are bad people out there who take advantage of vulnerable people. You're right, Richard. That's why I'm getting them out of my life. The implication was clear. Richard understood perfectly that I was referring to them. You know what? He said, his voice full of venom. You're right. You're a foolish, bitter old woman. Jessica has killed herself trying to have a relationship with you. But you've always been the victim. Always complaining, always being dramatic. Richard, stop, Jessica mumbled, but without much conviction. No, Jessica. Your mother needs to hear this. She's been emotionally manipulating you for years, making you feel guilty for having a successful life. And now that she finally has money, what does she do? She punishes us for not worshiping the ground she walks on. Emotionally manipulating her? I repeated. unable to believe what I was hearing. I manipulated Jessica by working 3 jobs to pay for her college? I manipulated her by selling my jewelry for her sweet 16 party? I manipulated her by raising her alone after her father abandoned us? You manipulated her by making her feel like she owed you for all of that. In that moment, something inside me broke completely, but it didn't break like it had before, with pain and sadness. It broke with liberation, with clarity, with a strength I never knew I had. You're right, Richard. Jessica doesn't owe me anything. Absolutely nothing. And because of that, I don't owe her anything either. I turned to my daughter, who was still crying her tears of rage. Jessica, listen to me carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. For 41 years, I was your mother. I changed your diapers. I nursed your fevers. I comforted your tears. I applauded your victories. I gave you everything I had, and many things I didn't. Mom, I'm not finished. For the last 3 years, you've been a stranger who shares my last name. You have treated me like an inconvenience, as if you were ashamed of me, as if my existence were a problem to be solved. That's not true. Last Friday, you refused me a glass of water. On Monday, you showed up with flowers pretending you loved me. Do you know what the difference was between those 2 days? Jessica didn't answer. The money. Only the money. I took an envelope I had prepared that morning from my bedside table. Here's $500. It's the last thing you will ever receive from me. Consider it payment for all the years you pretended to love me. Jessica didn't take the envelope. She just stared at me as if I had grown a second head. Are you cutting me off? No, honey. You cut me off years ago. I'm just realizing it now. Richard took Jessica by the arm. Let's go. We're not going to beg for scraps. But before he left, he turned to me one last time. I hope you're happy with your money, Evelyn. Because when you die, alone and bitter, that money won't keep you company. You're right, Richard. But while I'm alive, neither will you. They left, slamming the door so hard it echoed down the hospital hallway. Maria came running in 5 minutes later. Mrs. Morales, are you okay? We heard yelling all the way from the nurse's station. I'm perfect, honey. For the first time in years, I'm perfect. And it was true. I felt as if I had been carrying a backpack full of rocks for decades and had finally given myself permission to take it off. I slept better that night than I had in months, because I had learned something that no one had taught me in 64 years of life. Sometimes, the family you choose not to have is more important than the family you do. After the confrontation with Jessica and Richard, something extraordinary began to happen. The world became quieter, but also more beautiful. No more WhatsApp messages feigning concern. No more calls asking about my health with ulterior motives. No more visits laden with financial expectations disguised as filial love. Just peace. The doctors discharged me a week later. My hip was healing well, but I still needed a cane to walk. Maria helped me with the discharge paperwork and walked me to the taxi. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say. For 64 years, I had always had a specific place to be. My parents' house, then my own house, then the hospital. But now I had over $1.5 million and the complete freedom to decide where I wanted to live. To a hotel, I said finally. The Lancaster Hotel, downtown. Maria looked at me surprised. A hotel, ma'am? Yes, honey. I need time to decide what I'm going to do with my new life. The Lancaster was a place I had always admired from the outside whenever I was in the theater district. Elegant but not ostentatious, with that quiet dignity of well-made things that last a long time. I had never been able to afford even a cup of coffee in its lobby. Now, I could stay there as long as I wanted. Good afternoon, I said to the receptionist, a well-dressed young man who regarded me with professional courtesy. I'd like a room, please. For how many nights, ma'am? I'm not sure yet. Could you bill me weekly? Of course. Would you prefer a standard room or a suite? Suite. A word I had never used to describe a place I was going to sleep. A suite, please. The room was more beautiful than I could have imagined. Large windows with a view of the city, a small living area with comfortable armchairs, a king-sized bed with sheets that smelled of expensive fabric softener, and a bathroom with a tub big enough to stretch out in. For the first time in weeks, I took a real bath. with bath salts I found in the bathroom, with hot water that never ran out, with enough time to just soak until my aching muscles finally relaxed. As I lay submerged in that warm water that felt like an embrace, I cried. But I didn't cry from sadness. I cried with relief. I cried because I finally understood that the loneliness I had feared for years was not nearly as terrifying as the false company I had been tolerating. I cried because I realized I had spent decades living for the approval of people who were never going to approve of me. And I cried because, for the first time I could remember, nobody was asking me for anything. That first night in the hotel, I ordered room service. Something I had never done in my life. I looked at the menu as if it were a text in a foreign language. Food that cost what I used to earn in a week as a seamstress, but that I could now order without worrying about how I was going to pay the next mortgage bill. I ordered grilled salmon with vegetables and a glass of white wine. When it arrived, the waiter served it at a table by the window, set with a white tablecloth and silver cutlery that gleamed under the soft light of an elegant lamp. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, watching the city move to its normal rhythm out the window while my own life was completely transforming. The salmon tasted different from the fish I used to buy at the market. Not better or worse, just different. As if it belonged to a world I'd never had access to. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I went for a walk with no particular destination. I walked through the Galleria with my cane, stopping at the display windows of shops I had only ever glanced at from afar. I went into a bookstore and bought 3 novels without looking at the price. I went into a fancy coffee shop and ordered a cappuccino that cost as much as my entire day's worth of food when I was working. In the afternoon, I called a real estate agency. "I want to buy a house," I told the agent, an efficient woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Allison. "What area are you interested in, ma'am?" "Somewhere nice, safe, where I can have a garden and some peace." "What's your budget?" "Up to $1 million. I saw Allison's eyes light up. She probably wasn't expecting a 64-year-old woman with a cane to have that kind of budget. "Perfect. I have several options that might interest you." Over the next 3 days, Allison took me to see houses in the Heights, Montrose, and West University. Houses with yards full of crepe myrtles, houses with screened-in porches where I could sit and read in the mornings, houses with kitchens where I could cook my brisket without anyone criticizing it for not being universal enough. The house I chose was in the Heights, 2 blocks from the farmer's market and a short drive from downtown. It had 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen with a window overlooking the garden, a small but cozy living room, and a backyard with a lemon tree that had been bearing fruit for years that no one ever picked. "It's perfect," I told Allison as we walked through the neglected but promising yard. "Are you sure?" "It needs some minor repairs." "I'm sure. I like that it has its own history." I signed the papers a week later. For the first time in my life, I was the sole owner of something. A house that no one had given me, that no one could take away from me, that existed just for me. While I waited for the closing process to be finalized, I continued to live at the hotel, but now I had a project, imagining what my life would be like in my own home. I bought new furniture, not expensive or luxurious furniture, but comfortable pieces that I liked. A brown sofa where I could lie down and read. A dining table for 4, even though I knew I would probably eat alone most of the time. A queen-sized bed with an orthopedic mattress that wouldn't hurt my hip when I got up in the mornings. I also bought things I had never allowed myself. A big screen TV, a coffee maker that made coffee exactly the way I liked it, and beautiful dishes for when I wanted to feel special, even if I was alone. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the hospital, while I was having breakfast in the hotel restaurant, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Evelyn Morales?" "Yes, this is she." "This is Mr. Morales calling. I have news about your case." My lawyer had been investigating Jessica and Richard's actions. It turned out this wasn't the first time they had tried to manipulate older relatives to get access to their resources. Your sister-in-law, Sandra, Richard's sister, filed a similar complaint 2 years ago. Richard pressured her to lend him money for his law firm when she received her 401k payout. When Sandra refused, he convinced Jessica to cut off all communication with her. Really? Really, and there's more. We found that Richard has over $200,000 in debt with 2 different banks. His firm isn't doing as well as it seems. It all started to make sense. Richard's desperation to get my money wasn't just greed, it was necessity. What can I do with this information, Mr. Morales? For now, nothing. Just keep it as backup in case they try to take any legal action against you. But I think it's important for you to know that your decision to protect your money was the right one. That afternoon, while strolling through a park near my new house, I came across a scene that filled my heart. A grandmother, probably in her 70s, was sitting on a bench, reading a story to her granddaughter, who was about 5. The little girl listened with complete attention, interrupting every now and then to ask a question or to have her repeat a part she liked. And then what happened, Grandma? Then, sweetie, the princess realized she didn't need anyone to rescue her. She could rescue herself. I stood a few feet away, listening to this improvised story from a grandmother who knew her granddaughter well enough to know exactly what kind of stories she liked. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the grandchildren I didn't know, for the stories I would never tell them, for the Sundays in the park we would never share. But then I thought of something different. I thought that maybe, someday, I would meet children who did want to hear my stories. Children of neighbors, of friends I might make, of this new community I was building for myself. Children who would see me as Mrs. Evelyn who tells nice stories, not as the rich grandmother their parents hoped to get something from. I returned to the hotel that night with a strange, new feeling, anticipation. For the first time in years, I was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. 3 months after moving into my house in the Heights, my life had found a rhythm I never thought possible. I woke up when my body wanted to, not when an alarm clock went off to go work for someone else. I made my coffee in my own kitchen, sweetening it exactly how I liked, with no rush, no looking at the clock, no calculating how much time I had before facing another day of other people's obligations. My garden had become my dearest project. I planted tomatoes, peppers, cilantro, and even some marigolds that my neighbor, Mrs. Carroll, had given me. The lemon tree now bore fruit that I harvested every week to make lemonade and to give to the neighbors who had become my friends without asking for anything in return. Mrs. Carroll was 72 and had been widowed the year before. Her husband had been a taxi driver for 40 years, and she had raised 5 children by taking in ironing. We met the first day I arrived, when she came over to offer me a pitcher of sweet tea and to ask if I needed help with anything. "Welcome to the neighborhood, dear. If you need anything at all, just give me a holler." She didn't ask where I came from or why I had arrived alone. She didn't ask me to tell her my family history or make me feel like I had to justify my presence there. She simply accepted me as a new neighbor and offered her friendship unconditionally. Mr. Albert, the man with the fruit stand at the corner farmer's market, had also become part of my daily routine. Every Tuesday and Friday, I'd go buy vegetables from him, and he would always set aside the reddest tomatoes and the freshest onions for me. "For you, Mrs. Evelyn, because I know you're a good cook." How did he know I was a good cook? Because one day I brought him some tamales I had made from scratch, just because I felt like cooking for someone other than myself. Mr. Albert ate them with a smile so genuine that he asked for the recipe to give to his daughter-in-law. "Oh, ma'am, these tamales taste just like the ones my mother used to make." That comparison filled my heart more than all the false compliments I had received from Jessica in recent years. I had also signed up for a reading workshop at the Heights Neighborhood Library, 5 blocks from my house. There were 8 of us older women who met every Thursday afternoon to read poetry, novels, and sometimes to write our own stories. The workshop coordinator, Mrs. Martinez, was a woman in her 60s who had been an elementary school teacher for 30 years. She had that infinite patience that only people who have dedicated their lives to helping others learn new things can develop. "Reading is the cheapest way to travel," she would tell us, "and writing is the most honest way to get to know yourself." In that workshop, I met women with stories similar to mine. Mrs. Rose, who had worked as a housekeeper her whole life until her employers left her a small inheritance when they passed away. Mrs. Maria Elena, who had raised 6 children alone after her husband abandoned them, and who now finally had time to read the books she had always wanted to read. "I believe life gives us 2 chances." Mrs. Rose told me one Thursday as we drank tea after the workshop. The first when we're young and don't know anything. The second when we're old and we've finally figured out what it's all about. That philosophy had become my way of looking at things. This was my second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it trying to fix relationships that had been broken for years. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was watering my plants, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found a little girl, about 8 years old, looking at me with curiosity. "Are you the lady who makes the yummy tamales?" A young, pregnant woman appeared behind her, looking apologetic. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'm Lucy. I live 3 doors down. My daughter Sophia heard Mr. Albert talking about your tamales, and she hasn't left me alone about coming to meet you." Sophia. The same name as my granddaughter, the one I didn't know. "Would you like to come in for a glass of sweet tea, Sophia?" The girl's eyes lit up. "Can I, Mom?" Lucy hesitated for a moment, but something in my expression seemed to reassure her. Just for a little while. That afternoon, Sophia sat in my kitchen while I prepared her a glass of sweet tea with lots of ice, just the way I liked it when I was her age. She asked me 1,000 questions. Why I lived alone, if I had grandchildren, if I knew how to make a 7-layer cake, if I had seen the movie Coco. My grandma lived alone too, she told me as she sipped her tea. But she passed away when I was 5. I miss her a lot sometimes. What do you miss most about her? She used to tell me stories she made up just for me. Stories where I was the hero and could do magic. That day, for the first time in years, I made up a story. The story of a girl named Sophia, who had the power to grow magical flowers that could cure people's sadness. The little girl listened to me with the same complete attention I had seen in the park. When she left, I sat in my kitchen with a strange and new feeling. I had found a granddaughter who actually wanted to spend time with me, not out of family obligation, but by her own choice. From then on, Sophia and her mom Lucy became part of my life. Sophia would come to visit me on Sunday afternoons, always hoping to hear a new story. Lucy, who was a single mother working as a secretary in a government office, was grateful to have someone she trusted for her daughter to spend time with. "You have no idea how much this means to us, Mrs. Evelyn. Sophia talks about you all week. I talked about Sophia all week, too. To Mrs. Carroll, to Mr. Albert, to my friends at the reading workshop. I finally had a little one in my life who got excited when she saw me. One day, while Sophia and I were planting cilantro seeds in my garden, she asked me something I wasn't expecting. 'Mrs. Evelyn, why don't you live with your family?' I was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words to explain something so complicated to an 8-year-old. 'Sometimes, Sophia, families hurt each other without meaning to. And when that happens a lot, it's better for everyone to live in their own house so they don't hurt each other anymore. But don't they miss you?' 'Maybe, sweetie. But I used to miss them too, even when we were together, because they weren't very nice to me. So it's better this way. Yes, it's better this way.' That conversation made me understand something it had taken me 64 years to grasp. Family isn't defined by blood, but by genuine affection. Sophia felt more for me in 3 months than Jessica had shown in 3 years. And I felt more happiness making up stories for a little girl who wasn't my biological granddaughter than I had ever felt trying to earn the love of the one who was. 4 months after moving to the Heights, I received a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Santiago and Sophia, my grandchildren, playing in what looked like the backyard of an elegant house. The message below it read, "The kids ask about you sometimes. Hope you're well. Jay." I looked at the photo for several minutes. They were beautiful children, resembling Jessica when she was their age. Santiago had the same big, curious eyes I remembered from my daughter. Sophia had a smile that reminded me of my own when I was little. I felt a pang of sadness for everything we had lost, for the stories I hadn't told them, for the Sundays we hadn't shared, for the hugs we had never given each other. But I also felt something stronger than sadness, peace, because I no longer had that desperate anguish from before, that need to be accepted at any cost that had made me tolerate humiliation for years. I had my own life now, a life I liked, with people who loved me unconditionally, with routines that made me happy, with the freedom to be myself without apology. I replied to the message, "I hope they are well. Take care of them." And then I blocked the number. Not out of malice, but for my own protection. Because I had learned that sometimes loving someone from a distance is healthier than trying to salvage a relationship that hurts everyone involved. That night, as I ate dinner in my garden under the soft glow of the string lights I had hung in the branches of my lemon tree, I thought about everything that had changed in my life. I was 64 years old. I lived alone, and I didn't have a traditional family that visited on Sundays. But I had something I had been searching for decades without knowing it: self-respect. I no longer woke up feeling small. I no longer spent my days waiting for someone else to decide if I was worthy of love. I no longer went to bed wondering what I had done wrong to make the most important people in my life treat me as if I were invisible. Now I woke up excited to water my plants, to buy vegetables from Mr. Albert, to invent a new story for Sophia, to read another book at the library workshop. I went to bed grateful for the silence of my house, for the absence of drama, for the presence of peace. And I had understood the most important lesson of my life. True love doesn't hurt all the time. If a relationship makes you feel small, insignificant, or constantly indebted, it's not love. It's emotional dependency disguised as family affection, and I, after 64 years, had finally learned the difference. 6 months after my last contact with Jessica, something unexpected happened. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in my garden teaching Sophia how to plant radish seeds when I heard my doorbell ring. The little girl ran to peek through the living room window. "Mrs. Evelyn, there's a lady at the door. She looks like you, but younger." My heart sped up. I knew exactly who it was. "Sophia, go on home to your mom. Tell her we'll finish planting later, okay?" The girl ran off towards her house, and I walked slowly to the front door. I took a deep breath before opening it. There was Jessica. But she looked different, thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, without her usual perfect makeup. She was wearing simple clothes, regular jeans and a white blouse that had seen better days. She no longer carried that air of superiority she had worn for years. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Jessica." We stood at the door for several seconds, measuring the emotional distance that had grown between us. Can I come in?" "What for?" The question disarmed her. In the past, I would have immediately invited her in, offered her coffee, asked if she was hungry. Now I needed to know her intentions before letting her into my safe space. To talk, to apologize. For what? For everything. I let her in, but I didn't take her to the living room. We stayed in the small entryway, where the conversation would have to be brief and to the point. "How did you know where I live?" "I hired a private investigator." The coldness of that answer confirmed that she hadn't come out of spontaneous remorse. She had been tracking me. "Why were you looking for me, Jessica?" She looked down. When she looked up again, her eyes were filled with tears that, for the first time in years, seemed genuine. "Richard and I are getting a divorce." I'm sorry to hear that." "No, Mom, don't be. You were right about him from the start." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "After what happened with you at the hospital, things started to change at home. Richard became aggressive, obsessed with the money we couldn't get from you. He said I had ruined our financial future." "Did he hurt you?" "Not physically, but emotionally, yes. He made me feel like a failure for not being able to manipulate you, as if my only purpose was to get money from my own mother." I felt a strange mixture of sadness and validation. Sadness for what she had suffered. Validation because my suspicions had been correct. The kids started asking me why Daddy was yelling so much, why we weren't happy anymore, and I didn't know what to tell them. Where are they now? With me. I got a small apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. I'm working again, at a smaller firm, making much less than before. She wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse. "Mom, I came here to tell you I'm sorry. Not just for what happened at the hospital, but for all these years, for treating you like you were less than us, for being ashamed of you, for letting Richard disrespect you in your own home." "Why now, Jessica?" "Because now I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like to have people judge you for your financial situation. I know what it feels like to need emotional support and have the people closest to you turn their backs." She paused for a moment, as if gathering the courage to say something even harder. "And because Santiago asked me the other day if he had a grandmother, I told him yes, but that you lived far away. And he asked me why we never visit you. What did you tell him? I lied. I told him you were very busy. But the truth, Mom, is that I couldn't tell him that his own mother had been such a bad daughter, that his grandmother would rather not know them. Those words felt like a full confession. For the first time in years, Jessica was accepting complete responsibility for her actions. And what do you expect from this conversation? Nothing. I don't expect anything. I'm not here to ask for money or help, or for you to rescue me from my situation. I'm just here to apologize and to tell you that I finally understand you were right to distance yourself from us. So, if someday, in the future, you wanted to meet your grandchildren, as people, not as a family obligation, I'd be willing to try. Slowly, with no pressure, only if you want to. I looked at her for several long moments. This Jessica looked more like the girl I had raised than the woman who had humiliated me in the hospital. I'm not going to lie to you, Jessica. I no longer feel that desperate need to have you in my life. I don't cry myself to sleep anymore because you don't call. I no longer wait for your approval to feel worthy. I know. And I'm glad. Because it means you've finally learned to value yourself. How are the children? Santiago asks about you a lot. Sophia is younger, but sometimes she says she wishes she had a grandma to teach her how to bake. I've told them some stories about when I was a little girl, about how you took care of me when I was sick, about the tamales you used to make at Christmas. Did you tell them why we hadn't seen each other? I told them that sometimes adults make very big mistakes, and that I had made the mistake of hurting my mom. I told them I was trying to be a better person so I could ask for your forgiveness someday. For the first time in our conversation, I felt that Jessica was being completely honest. All right, I said finally. We can try. Really? But on my terms. Anything. First rule, you will never ask me for money again. Not you, not the children when they grow up. My money is mine, and my will is already written. If we build a relationship, it will be based on genuine affection, not financial expectations. I accept. Second rule, if either of you disrespects me again, it's over. I will not tolerate humiliation ever again in my life. I accept. Third rule, we build this relationship slowly. You're not moving in with me. I am not your free babysitter. You are not using my house as a refuge when you have problems. We will see each other when we both want to, not out of obligation. I accept. And the fourth rule, the children have to want to know me for themselves. If they come because you're forcing them, they're better off not coming at all. Understood. Jessica stood in my entryway, waiting for something more. Can I ask you something, Mom? Go ahead. Are you happy now? The question took me by surprise, but the answer came to my mind immediately. Yes, Jessica. For the first time in years, I am genuinely happy. I'm glad. I'm really glad. You deserve it after everything you suffered because of me. She moved as if to hug me, but then stopped. May I? I nodded. The hug was different from any we had shared in years. It wasn't the mechanical hug of obligatory family goodbyes. It was the hug of two women who had hurt each other deeply and were trying to find a way back to affection. Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve, she whispered in my ear. Everyone deserves a second chance, honey. Even you. After she left, I sat in my garden until it was completely dark. Mrs. Carroll peeked over the fence that separated our yards. Everything okay, Evelyn? Yes, Carol. Everything is fine. Was that your daughter? Yes. She came to apologize. And what are you going to do? We're going to try to build something new, something more honest than what we had before. I'm so glad to hear that, neighbor. Genuine apologies are hard to come by. That night, before I fell asleep, I reflected on everything I had learned in these months. I had learned that self-love isn't selfishness, but emotional survival. I had learned that saying no doesn't make you a bad person, but a person who respects herself. I had learned that chosen solitude is infinitely better than toxic company. I had learned that it's never too late to start a new life, even at 64. And I had learned that sometimes, to save a relationship, you first have to be willing to lose it completely. 2 weeks later, Jessica brought Santiago and Sophia to meet me, but that's another story. A story of second chances, of grandchildren who hug with genuine affection, of Sundays in the garden planting cilantro and telling made-up stories. A A story where the grandma who tells nice stories finally has her own grandchildren to listen. A story that began with a denied glass of water and a broken heart, but ended with genuine forgiveness and a family rebuilt on a more solid foundation. Because sometimes, hitting rock bottom is what you need to find the strength you always had, but had forgotten how to use. And sometimes, the best way to teach people how to treat you is by showing them that you can live perfectly well without them. Until they learn to treat you as you deserve. Have you, or has someone you know, been through something similar? Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to step away from family to protect your dignity. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it.